Everyone thought Sarah was just a gold-digging mechanic marrying billionaire Daniel Harrison. His family mocked her humble background until armed robbers crashed their wedding. When the attack began, Sarah revealed her shocking secret. She's a decorated war hero. Watch this incredible true story of hidden identity, family prejudice, and how one woman's military training saved everyone who once looked down on her. You won't believe this plot twist. The August heat turned Sarah's Newark garage into an oven. Metal tools too hot to touch, asphalt shimmering outside on Market Street where her father had run this same shop 20 years ago. She rolled out from under a Honda Civic, grease streaking her coveralls, just as a black Bentley pulled up with smoke pouring from under the hood. Wrong neighborhood for that car, Greenwich plates, Manhattan attitude. She could tell before he even stepped out. Daniel Harrison emerged in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than her monthly rent, looking around the garage like he'd taken a wrong turn into someone else's life. Is the owner here? His tone said he doubted it, doubted her. Sarah stood, wiped her hands on a rag that wouldn't get them clean. You're looking at her, pop the hood. She diagnosed it in 30 seconds. Wrong coolant, probably installed by some Park Avenue mechanic who'd charged him $500 for the privilege. Daniel watched her work with something like fascination, the way people watched things they didn't understand. When she explained the problem, his skepticism shifted into something sharper, more interested. How much do I owe you? $60. She didn't meet his eyes, easier that way, safer. Men in expensive suits didn't linger in Newark garages. They got their cars fixed and drove back to whatever world produced that kind of watch, that kind of certainty. But he lingered anyway. 3 weeks later, he came back, weird noise in the transmission. 2 weeks after that, brakes feel soft. Each visit, he stayed longer. Each conversation revealed more. He ran his family's investment firm, spent weekends at their Connecticut estate, had never met anyone who could rebuild an engine while explaining thermodynamics. Sarah kept her answers careful, edited. Grew up here, took over my dad's shop, studied engineering at community college. She didn't mention Quantico, didn't mention the 4 years that had carved her into something other than the girl who'd once dreamed of just fixing cars. She'd learned in Delta Force that the most dangerous weapon was information, what you revealed, what you kept hidden, what you let people believe about who you were. Finally, he called her out. My car's fine, has been for weeks. If you want to see me, just ask. Her hands stilled on the wrench. I don't date customers. Then I'll stop being a customer. That smile, genuine, unguarded, cracked something in her chest she'd kept carefully sealed. Their first real date was a diner in Hoboken overlooking the Manhattan skyline, and Sarah Reyes made a choice she'd spend the next 6 months questioning. She let herself want something soft, something normal, something that felt like the future instead of the past. She should have known better. Women like her didn't get soft things. They got consequences. 6 months built themselves quietly. Weekend drives from his Greenwich estate to her Newark garage, walks through Central Park where nobody knew either of them, late nights at her apartment above the shop where Daniel learned that Sarah took her coffee black and her secrets darker. He asked about her scars once, tracing the puckered tissue on her shoulder. She'd deflected smoothly. Car accident, years ago. Lying to him felt like swallowing glass, but the truth felt worse. How do you tell someone raised on Connecticut lawns and prep school lacrosse that you've killed 17 people, that you wake up some nights still smelling burning flesh, that the precision in your hands comes from assembling weapons in Fallujah darkness? So she gave him the edited version. Community college, her father's death, the shop, the simple dream of fixing broken things. He fell in love with that woman, the mechanic, the humble girl from Newark who didn't care about his money. Sarah fell in love with how he saw her, clean, uncomplicated, worthy of soft things. The proposal came on a Cape May beach at sunset, Daniel kneeling in sand that stuck to his expensive slacks, his voice shaking with something that sounded like faith. I don't care where you came from, I care where we're going. She said yes through tears she couldn't name, part grief, part hope, part terror that he'd eventually see past the woman she was performing and find the soldier she'd been. The ring felt heavy, 3 carats, platinum band, the weight of a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Then she met his family. The Harrison estate in Greenwich sat on 12 acres overlooking Long Island Sound, 8,000 square feet of marble floors and inherited wealth and the kind of money that made people like Sarah invisible. Catherine Harrison descended the curved staircase in Chanel, diamonds catching light at her throat, and delivered her assessment with surgical precision. It's so interesting that Daniel is marrying someone so different. That pause before different landed like a blade between ribs. Dinner stretched across 2 hours on the terrace. William Harrison asking pointed questions about her little shop, Catherine steering conversation toward Connecticut real estate and Manhattan charity galas, Daniel's sister Alexandra examining Sarah's hands with barely concealed disgust. When Sarah mentioned growing up in Newark, the temperature dropped. When she explained she'd studied engineering at community college, not Princeton, Catherine's smile went sharp. How resourceful, she said, the word turning praise into condescension. Daniel's always had such a big heart. Remember that stray he brought home from Greenwich Academy? Sarah's tactical watch pressed against her wrist beneath the table. Never quit, never forget. And she made another choice. She smiled, thanked them for their hospitality, and swallowed every word she wanted to say. She'd survived worse than social warfare. She could survive this. She had no idea survival was about to require an entirely different skill set. The engagement party at the Harrisons' Manhattan penthouse was 200 people who'd never set foot in Newark. Wall Street executives, Greenwich socialites, women in dresses that cost more than Sarah's monthly mortgage. She wore something Catherine had approved with a resigned sigh, stood beside Daniel accepting congratulations from people whose eyes slid past her like oil on water. "Where did you two meet?" asked a woman dripping in pearls. "My garage, his car broke down." The woman's laugh was delicate, cruel. How cinematic. Like Pretty Woman, but with cars. Sarah excused herself, found the powder room, marble counters, gold fixtures, the kind of bathroom that cost more than her entire shop. She was washing her hands when Catherine's voice drifted through the door, speaking to someone in the hallway. Those hands, you can tell she works with them. Calloused, rough. What will people think at the wedding? I've suggested gloves, but... Sarah looked down at her palms, the same hands that had held her dying sergeant in Fallujah, that had assembled a rifle blindfolded in Quantico, that had pulled 3 civilians from a collapsed building while mortar fire turned the sky orange. She clenched them into fists, old habit, muscle memory from briefings where showing emotion meant showing weakness. She forced them open, smoothed her dress, walked back to the party smiling. Daniel found her on the terrace overlooking Central Park, the city spreading below them in a grid of lights. "You okay? You seem quiet." "Just tired." The lie came easy now. She'd been performing for 6 months, getting good at it. "Your family's a lot." He pulled her close, kissed her temple. "They'll come around, they just need time to see what I see." But what did he see? The mechanic, the simple girl, the edited version she'd carefully constructed? Sarah wanted to tell him everything. About Captain Emma Reyes, about the silver star tucked in her shop's safe, about the nightmares where she still smelled burning metal and heard Rodriguez screaming. She wanted to ask if he'd still love her if he knew her hands had taken lives, if normal was something she was performing rather than something she'd earned. Instead she kissed him back, let him believe the quietness was just nerves about the wedding. Agent Chen called again that night after Daniel dropped her home. This time she answered. "Captain Reyes, we've intercepted communications. There's credible threat chatter about targeting former Delta operators at public events. Your wedding's in 3 weeks. We need to discuss security protocols." "I'm not Captain Reyes anymore." Her voice came out harder than intended. "That's not my life. Your past doesn't care what life you want." She hung up, deleted the voicemail, climbed into bed. Outside her window, Newark hummed with sirens and distant traffic, the soundtrack of a world that felt safer than the one she was marrying into, even though she knew better. Knew that safety was illusion, that threat assessment never stopped, that the warrior in her was just waiting for permission to surface. 3 weeks until the wedding, 3 weeks to keep performing normal, 3 weeks until everything she'd buried came roaring back. Wedding planning became a battlefield with different rules. No bullets, just 1,000 small cuts disguised as concern. Catherine insisted on controlling everything. The venue, Harrison Estate, naturally, the guest list, her friends, her world. The dress, modest, appropriate, nothing that would embarrass the family. Sarah attended fittings in Manhattan boutiques where saleswomen measured her like she was livestock, listened to Catherine dismiss every choice. Too revealing for someone with your build. Daniel became the bridge she had to cross repeatedly. Meeting him meant entering his family's territory, their country clubs and charity luncheons and Sunday dinners where she was always the outsider. Greenwich, Connecticut became enemy terrain. She learned its landscape the way she'd once learned Fallujah's streets, mapping exit routes and threat assessments from habit she couldn't break. At the Greenwich Country Club, Catherine's friends circled with practiced smiles and surgical questions. "What university, dear?" "Community college." "Where does your family summer?" "At work." And your mother, what does she do? Dead. Car accident. I was 9. Each answer landed like failure. Each pause before their responses told her exactly what they thought. Alexandra, Daniel's sister, was worse, direct where Catherine was subtle. You know his dated models, right? Actresses. Women who fit this world. She gestured vaguely at the club's dining room, at the wealth displayed casually as air. What makes you think you can? Sarah could have broken her wrist in 3 moves, muscle memory from hand-to-hand combat training, from the night in Kandahar when an insurgent grabbed her from behind and she dropped him before her team could react. Instead she smiled, excused herself, went to the bathroom and stared at her reflection until the urge to violence passed. Daniel found her there, concern creasing his face. They're being awful. I'm sorry. I'll talk to them. Don't. She touched his cheek, forced softness into her voice. They're your family. They're protecting you. I get it. But he didn't get it. Didn't understand that every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, every moment they made her feel small was training her to retreat, to hide, to bury herself deeper beneath the performance of who they needed her to be. The warrior in her recognized the strategy. Isolate the target, undermine confidence, make them doubt their own worth until surrender felt like relief. She wouldn't surrender, but she was learning to disappear, letting Catherine dictate the wedding, letting Alexandra's comments slide, letting Daniel's family reshape her into something acceptable. Each compromise felt like dying slowly. Each smile felt like betrayal of the woman who'd earned a silver star, who'd led soldiers through hell, who'd once believed she was worth something beyond what men in expensive suits decided. The bridal shower was in 2 days, Catherine's friends, Catherine's rules, another performance in a war Sarah couldn't win because the weapons were words and the casualties were pieces of herself she'd never get back. Unless she walked away. Unless she chose herself over this life Daniel offered, this normal that required her to become someone she wasn't. She didn't walk away. Love and stubbornness and maybe something like hope kept her moving forward, kept her planning a wedding to a man whose family would never think she was enough. Agent Chen called again. She didn't answer. The bridal shower happened in Catherine's Greenwich living room. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, 30 women in designer dresses playing games designed to humiliate. How well do you know the groom? They asked questions Sarah answered wrong because she knew Daniel the man, not Daniel the Harrison heir. Didn't know his kindergarten teacher's name or which year he'd summered in the Hamptons or what his first car was because those details belonged to a life she'd never be part of. Catherine watched with satisfaction as Sarah fumbled through questions, watched her daughter-in-law-to-be fail test after test in front of women who'd known Daniel since prep school. When it ended, Sarah helped clean up, old habit, worker instinct, while the guests filtered out whispering. She was carrying champagne flutes to the kitchen when she overheard Catherine and Alexandra in the study, door half open, voices low but clear. She's completely wrong for him. You see that, right? Alexandra's voice, sharp with conviction. Of course I see it. Catherine, tired, resigned. But Daniel's stubborn, always has been. We push too hard, he'll marry her out of spite. So what do we do? A pause, then, we wait. Girls like that don't last in our world. The pressure breaks them eventually. She'll realize she doesn't belong, that she can't keep up, that she's embarrassing him, and she'll leave. They always do. Sarah's hands tightened on the crystal, careful, controlled, the discipline that kept her from shattering it. She set the glasses down silently, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and for the first time in 3 years let herself remember. Captain Emma Reyes standing in the Fallujah heat, her sergeant bleeding out in her arms, his last words. Don't let them forget us. Don't let them think we didn't matter. She'd held him while he died, then picked up her rifle and led her team through hostile territory for 6 miles until they reached extraction. The Silver Star citation said she'd shown extraordinary heroism under fire. What it didn't say was that she'd killed 3 insurgents that day, that their faces still visited her at 3 a.m., that heroism felt like carrying ghosts. She'd left the military believing she was broken, believing the violence had made her unworthy of soft things, marriage, family, the quiet life her father had wanted for her. Catherine's words confirmed what Sarah had feared. She didn't belong in Daniel's world because she didn't belong anywhere, was too damaged for normal, too stained by war to deserve peace. Her phone buzzed, Agent Chen, another voicemail. Captain, the threats escalated. We've identified the cell, 6 operatives, former military themselves, targeting a list of Delta operators. Your name is on it. Your wedding is in 1 week. We need to implement security. She deleted it, splashed water on her face, went back to the living room where Catherine was boxing up decorations, and said the words that cost her everything. "Thank you for today. It was lovely." The performance continued. The warrior stayed buried. The wedding approached like a storm Sarah could feel but couldn't name, carrying threats she'd convinced herself belonged to someone else's life. That night, Daniel showed up at her Newark apartment unannounced. Rare for him, this crossing into her world instead of summoning her to his. He carried takeout from the diner where they'd had their first date, his tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face in lines she recognized. The weight of family expectation, of trying to bridge two worlds that refused to meet. "I heard what my mother said." He set the food on her kitchen counter, this tiny space above the garage that smelled like motor oil and coffee. "Alexandra called me, gloating, thought I should know my fiancé was eavesdropping." Sarah's defenses went up automatically. "I wasn't. I don't care if you were." He crossed to her, took her hands, those rough, calloused hands his mother hated, and held them like they were something precious. "Sarah, I need you to hear this. You're not the one who doesn't belong. They are. Everything about them, the money, the country clubs, the performance of who we're supposed to be. That's the lie. You're the only real thing in my life." Something cracked in her chest. She pulled away, turned toward the window overlooking Market Street where her father's shop sign still hung, rusted but standing. "You don't know me, not really. You know the version I've shown you, the mechanic, the simple girl. But there's—" She stopped, the truth sitting in her throat like shrapnel. "Then show me." Daniel's voice, soft behind her. "Whatever you're hiding, whatever you think will make me stop loving you, show me." She almost did, almost told him about Fallujah, about the silver star in her safe, about the nightmares and the body count and the woman she'd been before she'd convinced herself that normal was possible. But fear won, fear that he'd look at her differently, that the warrior would eclipse the woman, that he'd realize his mother was right about her not belonging. Instead, she turned back, kissed him, let the physical replace the verbal. They made love in her small bed beneath the window where Newark sirens sang their familiar song, and afterward Daniel traced the scars mapping her body. The bullet graze on her ribs, the knife wound on her shoulder, the burns on her forearms, and didn't ask their origin because he believed her lies about accidents, about the random violence of a hard life rather than the deliberate violence she'd chosen. "1 week," he whispered against her hair. "Then you're mine and I'm yours and none of them matter." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe love could outweigh judgment, that belonging was something you built rather than something you performed. For a few hours in the darkness, held by someone who thought he knew her, Sarah let herself imagine a future where the past stayed buried, where Captain Emma Reyes remained a ghost, where the wedding would be just a wedding and not a reckoning. Agent Chen's warning sat in her deleted voicemails like a bomb with a ticking clock. Outside, Newark hummed its dangerous lullaby. Inside, Daniel slept peacefully while Sarah stayed awake doing what soldiers do: threat assessment, exit routes, the calculations that never stopped even when she pretended they had. 6 days until the wedding, 6 days until she became Mrs. Harrison, 6 days until her two worlds collided in ways she couldn't predict but could feel coming, like weather, like war, like everything she'd tried to outrun finally catching up. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding, 50 people at an exclusive Greenwich restaurant, Catherine's final performance of gracious hostess before surrendering her son to someone she considered beneath them. Sarah wore the dress Catherine had approved, smiled through toasts that praised Daniel's charitable heart and open mind, sat through a slideshow of his life that contained 0 photos of her because 6 months wasn't enough time to integrate into 32 years of documented privilege. William Harrison stood for the final toast, champagne glittering in crystal, his voice carrying that boardroom authority that made lesser men flinch. To Daniel, who's always marched to his own drum, and to Sarah, who we're sure will adapt to our family's expectations. Adapt. The word hung in the air like a threat, like a demand, like the truth finally spoken aloud. She was expected to change, to sand down every rough edge, to become whatever shape fit their world. The room applauded. Daniel squeezed her hand under the table. Sarah felt something inside her begin to fracture. After dinner, she escaped to the restaurant's terrace overlooking Greenwich Harbour where boats bobbed in darkness, their masts like prison bars against the sky. She was checking her phone, another missed call from Agent Chen, another warning she'd been ignoring, when Alexandra found her. "Can we talk?" Not a question, a demand. Alexandra held her own champagne, swirled it like she was working up to something. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you love him, or do you love what he can give you?" Sarah's tactical training kicked in. Assess the threat, Identify the real question beneath the question. Determine if engagement or retreat serves the mission. I love him. But you're lying to him. Alexandra's smile was sharp, knowing. I had you investigated. Don't look so shocked. We do it with everyone Daniel dates seriously. You weren't just a mechanic, were you? You were military, discharged 3 years ago, classified service record, the kind of past that gets redacted. What are you hiding, Sarah? What did you do that you're so desperate to bury? The world tilted. Sarah's hands clenched automatically into fists, muscle memory from briefings where operational security meant survival. That's not. I haven't told Daniel yet, wanted to see if you'd be honest with him first. But tomorrow, at the wedding, if you don't tell him the truth about who you really are. Alexandra let the threat hang unfinished, devastating in its simplicity. She walked away, leaving Sarah alone on the terrace with the sound of boats creaking against their moorings and the certain knowledge that her carefully constructed life was disintegrating. Alexandra knew, not everything, the records were too classified for that, but enough to destroy the story Sarah had built, enough to prove she'd been lying for 6 months, enough to confirm every terrible thing Catherine believed about her. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She should call Daniel, should tell him everything before Alexandra weaponized it, should finally trust that love might survive truth. Instead she called Agent Chen back. Captain Reyes. Don't call me that. Her voice cracked. The first time in 3 years she'd let anyone hear her break. I need to know, how credible is the threat? Really? A pause. Then, very. We've been tracking this cell for 8 months, former Afghan National Army, radicalized after their families were killed in operations they blame on US forces. They've already hit 2 targets on their list, both Delta operators, both at public events. Your wedding fits their profile perfectly, high visibility, soft target, symbolic impact. Captain, I'm begging you, let us secure the venue, let us. The wedding's tomorrow. Sarah looked back through the restaurant windows at Daniel laughing with his groomsmen, at Catherine holding court, at the life she'd almost convinced herself she could have. If I bring FBI to a Harrison wedding, if I tell them why, I have to tell them everything, who I was, what I did. Better than a massacre. You don't understand. The words came out raw, honest. I'm already losing him. His sister knows I've been hiding my past. She's going to expose me tomorrow anyway. At least this way, for one more night, I can pretend I'm just Sarah, just the mechanic, just the girl who fixes broken things, just someone who deserves normal. She hung up before Chen could respond, before the agent could make her face what she already knew. That normal was never hers to claim, that the warrior didn't retire just because you wanted her to, that tomorrow's wedding would become a battlefield whether she prepared for it or not. Inside, Daniel was looking for her. She could see him through the glass, his face bright with love for a woman who didn't exist, or who existed only in the spaces between truths, in the careful editing of a past too violent to share. Sarah turned back to the harbor, to the darkness spreading like inevitability, and made her final choice. She'd go to the wedding, marry Daniel if he'd still have her after Alexandra's revelation, and pray that Agent Chen's warnings were paranoid overreach rather than prophecy. She should have known better. Soldiers don't get prayers answered, they get firefights. Sarah didn't sleep that night, lay in her Newark apartment staring at the ceiling while scenarios played out in tactical precision. Alexandra exposing her at the wedding, Daniel's face when he realized she'd lied for 6 months, Catherine's vindication, the marriage dissolving before it began. Or worse, the wedding proceeding, Sarah carrying the secret like a blade between her ribs for the rest of her life, wondering when the next investigator would dig deeper, when the next threat would materialize, when the past would finally detonate the future. At 3 a.m., she opened her safe, the tactical watch, the silver star in its case, her discharge papers, the folded flag from her last mission. Evidence of Captain Emma Reyes, the woman she'd tried to kill with silence and motor oil and the desperate performance of normal. She traced the medal's engraving, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States, 43 lives saved, 17 enemies killed, 1 soul shattered into pieces she'd spent 3 years trying to reassemble. Her phone lit up. Daniel. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about tomorrow. I love you. Whoever you are, whatever you're afraid to tell me, I love you. Whoever you are, the words cracked something open. He knew she was hiding, had maybe always known, was offering her permission to be seen completely. Sarah typed and deleted 6 responses before settling on, I love you too. See you at the altar. She dressed before dawn, not in the approved wedding attire yet, but in running clothes, and drove to the Harrison estate in Greenwich as sunrise turned the sky pink over Long Island Sound. The grounds were already transforming, white chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch woven with roses, tables draped in silk, 200-place settings for 200 witnesses to either a wedding or a disaster. Security was minimal, 2 hired guards at the gate, checking the vendor list, waving through caterers and florists. Sarah assessed it with a soldier's eye, perimeter unsecured, multiple access points, no contingency protocols, the kind of soft target that invited catastrophe. Agent Chen's words echoed, symbolic impact, high visibility, everything a terrorist cell would want. She should tell someone, should call Chen back, should insist on FBI presence, should stop performing normal long enough to acknowledge that the threat was real. But doing so meant revealing herself before she chose to, meant losing control of her own narrative, meant letting the warrior emerge before the woman had a chance to say goodbye. Sarah walked the grounds alone, memorizing sight lines and cover positions from habit she couldn't break, her tactical mind mapping the space even as her heart tried to believe this was just wedding day nerves, just pre-ceremony jitters, just the normal fear of commitment rather than the soldier's certainty that something was coming. The sun climbed higher, vendors arrived in streams. Catherine appeared on the terrace directing staff with military precision of her own, the general of this social campaign. She saw Sarah and frowned. You're not supposed to be here yet, it's bad luck. But Sarah was already moving toward the bridal suite, toward the dress and the performance and the final hours before everything changed. In the suite, alone, she put on the gown Catherine had chosen, ivory silk, modest neckline, long sleeves hiding the scars. She clasped her tactical watch beneath the fabric, hidden against her wrist where its weight reminded her, never quit, never forget. Under the dress, old habit made her reach for her combat boots before reason intervened. This was a wedding, not a mission. She was Sarah the bride, not Captain Reyes the soldier. Except the boots fit better than the heels ever had, except muscle memory made her check the laces twice, except some part of her that never stopped doing threat assessment was screaming that today required armor, not silk. She compromised, boots under the long dress where no one would see, heels nearby for photos. If nothing happened, no one would know. If something did. Sarah cut the thought off, applied lipstick with hands that had assembled rifles in darkness, and prepared to walk down the aisle toward either a future or a reckoning, unable to tell which but certain, finally, that she couldn't outrun who she'd been no matter how desperately she'd tried. Downstairs, guests were arriving, Manhattan socialites and Greenwich elite and Catherine's friends, 200 people who'd spent 6 months making Sarah feel worthless, about to witness either her triumph or her destruction. Agent Chen called one final time. Sarah sent it to voicemail, checked her reflection, and whispered to the warrior she'd buried. Stay down, just for today, stay down, let me have this. But warriors don't negotiate. They wait for orders, for threat identification, for the moment when survival requires them to surface. That moment was 12 minutes away. The ceremony began at noon. Sarah walking down the aisle between 200 witnesses, Daniel waiting at the altar with a smile that said he believed in futures, Catherine in the front row radiating controlled disapproval, Alexandra watching with that knowing smirk that promised exposure. The minister opened his book, began the traditional words, and Sarah felt time stretching like wire under tension, waiting for Alexandra to object, for the secret to detonate. The first gunshot shattered the rose arch. Everything became muscle memory. Sarah's tactical brain processed while civilians screamed. 6 men, automatic weapons, coordinated entry through 3 access points, professional formation. The lead attacker's eyes locked on her, recognition flashing, target acquired. Not random robbery. This was the cell, the threat Agent Chen had warned about, former Afghan National Army here for Captain Emma Reyes. Everybody down. Sarah's voice carried command authority that made even Catherine drop. She kicked off her heels, the combat boots underneath suddenly visible, suddenly relevant, suddenly the only thing between survival and massacre. Daniel grabbed her arm. Sarah, what? Stay down. Not a request, an order from someone who'd led soldiers through worse. She assessed the tactical situation in seconds, attackers spreading to control exits, guests panicking toward the house creating a kill zone, 2 security guards already neutralized. The lead attacker raised his rifle toward the crowd. Sarah moved. Training took over. She closed the distance before he could fire, redirected his barrel upward, drove her palm into his throat with precision learned in Quantico hand-to-hand courses. He went down choking. She stripped his weapon in 3 seconds, dropped into cover behind an overturned table, and became Captain Emma Reyes. Federal agents incoming, she shouted. A guess, a prayer that Chen had positioned back up despite Sarah's refusal. Weapons on the ground, hands visible, or I drop every one of you. Her voice carried across the lawn, across the chaos, with the certainty of someone who'd made these calculations before. 2 attackers turned toward her. She fired twice, sent a mass, controlled pairs, the kind of shooting that came from 4 years downrange. They fell. The remaining 3 hesitated, recalculating. Their soft target had grown teeth. FBI vehicles crashed through the estate gates, Chen leading a tactical team in full gear. Captain Reyes, stand down. We have it. But Sarah was already moving, flanking the last attackers while they focused on federal agents, using terrain she'd memorized that morning. She took down the 4th with a leg sweep and disarm that left him unconscious before he hit the ground. The final 2 surrendered. Silence fell like aftermath, gun smoke drifting through roses, guests emerging from cover, Catherine Harrison staring at her future daughter-in-law holding a rifle like she'd been born to it. Which, in a way, she had been, forged in Fallujah, tempered in classified operations, buried in Newark until the moment required her resurrection. Daniel stood slowly, his face cycling through shock and confusion and something Sarah couldn't name. Sarah, what? Who are you? Agent Chen approached, badge visible. She's Captain Emma Reyes, Delta Force, Silver Star recipient, saved 43 lives during her service, including today. The terrorist cell was targeting former operators. She's been on their list for 6 months. He looked at Sarah with something like vindication. She knew. She tried to hide from it, but she knew. The crowd parted as Sarah walked toward Daniel, still in her wedding dress, combat boots visible beneath torn silk. Her hands, those rough, calloused hands Catherine had mocked, still gripping the rifle with casual competence. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see every emotion crossing his face. My name is Sarah Reyes. I was also Captain Emma Reyes, Delta Force, for 4 years. I left the military 3 years ago, came back to Newark, tried to build a normal life because I thought. Her voice cracked, the first vulnerability she'd shown since the shooting started. Because I thought the warrior made me unworthy of soft things. Of you. Of this life. So I buried her, buried the medals, the missions, the woman who knew how to kill, because I wanted to be just Sarah, just the mechanic, just someone simple enough to deserve love. You lied. Daniel's voice was flat, unreadable. I edited. I protected you from parts of me I thought would scare you away. You let my family humiliate you for 6 months. Not anger yet, something worse, like understanding arriving too late. Let my mother mock your hands, let Alexandra question your worth, let them treat you like you were beneath us when you're. He gestured helplessly at the scene, neutralized attackers, saved guests, the woman who'd moved through violence like water. Catherine approached slowly, her Chanel suit stained with grass, her diamonds crooked, her face showing something Sarah had never seen, uncertainty. You saved us. All of us. Those men would have killed everyone. Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact, soldier flat. That was their plan, target me, massacre witnesses, symbolic impact against U.S. military presence in their region. Your son's wedding was collateral damage. I knew the threat existed. I chose to ignore it because I wanted one normal day, one day where I wasn't the soldier, wasn't the killer, wasn't Captain Reyes. Her voice broke completely. I just wanted to marry someone who loved me without knowing what I've done. Daniel crossed the distance between them, took her face in his hands, gentle, despite everything. What have you done? Saved 43 lives. Taken 17. Led missions I can't talk about in places I can't name. Earned medals I keep in a safe because looking at them means remembering. She stopped, the words too heavy. I have PTSD. Nightmares. I wake up at 3 a.m. smelling burning metal. I count exits in every room and assess threat levels in crowds and carry guilt for every person I killed even though they were enemy combatants because taking a life marks your soul no matter the justification. And you thought I couldn't love that woman. Daniel's eyes held tears now, his voice raw with something between grief and wonder. You thought I'd love the performance but not the person. Sarah, I've watched you for 6 months, watched how you move through space like you're always ready for something, how your hands never stop being precise, how you get quiet when loud noises happen nearby. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew you were carrying something. And I loved you anyway, loved you without knowing why you were the way you were. Now I know, and nothing changes except. He kissed her, there in the wreckage of their wedding, While FBI agents processed the scene and guests watched, and Catherine Harrison's world restructured itself around a truth she'd never imagined. The woman she'd dismissed as common, as beneath them, as someone who'd break under pressure was the only reason any of them was still breathing. When they broke apart, Daniel whispered against her forehead, "Marry me, not the mechanic, not the performance. Marry me as Captain Sarah Reyes, as whoever you are completely, scars and medals and nightmares and all." Sarah pulled back, searched his face for doubt and found only certainty. "Your family will adjust." He glanced at Catherine, at Alexandra standing pale and silent, at William Harrison staring like he'd fundamentally miscalculated an investment. "Or they won't, and we'll build our own family. But I'm not losing you because you're more than I imagined. I'm not that stupid." Agent Chen cleared his throat. "Captain, we'll need your statement, full debrief on the engagement, the threat assessment, why you didn't request protective detail." Later. Daniel's voice carried authority of its own, the kind that came from boardrooms and inherited wealth and men who weren't used to being told no. "Right now, we're finishing this wedding." The minister, still crouched behind an overturned chair, stood shakily. "I don't think the venue is." "The venue is fine." Catherine's voice, surprisingly steady. She approached Sarah directly. No social performance, just a woman facing someone she'd fundamentally misjudged. "You saved my son. You saved me. You saved everyone here, and I spent 6 months treating you like—" She stopped, the apology stuck somewhere between pride and honesty. "Like I didn't belong." Sarah finished it for her, not unkindly. "You were right, I don't belong in this world. I never will. I'm a soldier who tried to play civilian, a killer who wanted to be simple, someone fundamentally broken trying to deserve something whole." "Stop." Alexandra spoke finally, her voice small, stripped of cruelty. "I had you investigated because I thought you were using Daniel, thought you were after money or status or something shallow. But the investigator found your medals, found the classified redactions, found enough to know you were hiding something significant. And I weaponized it, threatened to expose you, made you feel like the liar when you were just." She looked at the neutralized attackers, at the rifle still in Sarah's hands. "When you were protecting us from things we couldn't imagine. If someone you loved hid a painful past to protect you, could you forgive them? Let us know in the comments." The minister stepped forward cautiously, opened his book to where he'd been interrupted by gunfire. "Should we continue?" Sarah looked at Daniel, really looked at him, without the performance, without the editing, just the woman she'd become standing before the man who claimed to love all of her. "You sure? Because this is who I am, the woman who moves like a soldier, who counts exits, who'll wake you at 3 a.m. with nightmares about Fallujah, who your family will never fully accept because I'm not simple or safe or appropriate. I'm sure." No hesitation, no doubt. "Marry me, Captain Reyes." She smiled, first genuine smile in 6 months, the kind that reached her eyes. "Okay, but I'm keeping the boots." The ceremony continued in the wreckage, rose petals scattered by gunfire, guests slowly emerging from trauma, FBI agents securing the perimeter, Catherine Harrison watching her son marry a woman she'd spent 6 months trying to break, only to discover she was unbreakable, had already been broken by worse things than social warfare and had reassembled herself into something stronger. When the minister said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Daniel kissed Sarah like she was victory, like she was home, like she was exactly who he'd been waiting for even when he didn't know what he was waiting for. Agent Chen approached afterward, during the chaos of post-ceremony reorganization. "Captain, that was good work. Your tactical response probably saved 20 lives minimum given their firepower and the crowd density." "I'm not captain anymore." Sarah's voice was firm but not harsh. "I'm Mrs. Harrison now. The warrior served her purpose today, but she's not who I want to be." Respectfully. Chen smiled slightly. "You'll always be both. The question isn't whether you're a warrior or a wife, it's whether you can be both without one destroying the other. Today you were. Maybe that's enough." 6 months later, Sarah's shop in Newark had a new sign, Reyes and Harrison Automotive. Daniel had become a silent partner, though he showed up most weekends to learn basic repairs, getting his expensive clothes dirty while Sarah taught him the difference between carburetors and catalytic converters. Catherine visited once a month, still uncomfortable but trying, asking careful questions about Sarah's service, listening to edited stories about the missions she could discuss. Alexandra sent a Silver Star replica for their mantle with a note, "So everyone knows who you are." The nightmares didn't stop. Some things don't heal, just become manageable. But when Sarah woke at 3 a.m. smelling smoke, Daniel was there, pulling her close, whispering her name until Newark's familiar sirens brought her back. She'd learned something crucial. Normal wasn't performing simplicity. It was being complex and loved anyway, being the warrior and the wife, the killer and the mechanic, the woman with 17 ghosts and 43 reasons to keep living. On their mantel, next to the silver star, sat a photo from the wedding. Sarah in her combat boots and torn dress, rifle still in hand, kissing Daniel while FBI agents secured the scene behind them. Not the wedding they'd planned, but the one that let her finally stop hiding, stop performing, stop believing she had to choose between the soldier and the woman when she'd always been both. Some people are forged in fire. Sarah had been forged in Fallujah, tempered in Newark, and finally accepted in Greenwich, not despite who she'd been, but because of it. The Harrison family learned what Sarah had always known. Strength isn't performance, it's survival. Love isn't accepting easy things, it's embracing complicated ones. And sometimes, the woman they mock is the woman who saves them, not for their approval, but because that's what warriors do. Protect people who'll never understand the cost of protection, love people who'll never fully grasp what had to break inside you to make you capable of saving them. Sarah Reyes Harrison hung up her rifle that day, but she kept the boots, kept the watch, kept the parts of herself she'd tried to bury. Because you can't outrun who you are, you can only decide whether to let it destroy you or define you. She chose definition, chose love, chose the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of being both the woman who fixes engines and the soldier who ends threats, the wife who wants normal and the warrior who knows normal is an illusion, and somehow, impossibly, built a life that held space for all of it. What part of yourself have you been hiding, thinking it makes you unworthy of love? Share your story below. You might inspire someone else to stop hiding too.